From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
It covers each civilian kill, each military kill that has been internally reported, where it happened and when it happened. It is the most comprehensive history of a war to have ever been published during the course of a war.
It's one of the biggest leaks in U.S. military history. More than 90,000 internal records of U.S. military actions in Afghanistan over the past 6 years, published by the whistleblower website WikiLeaks. The documents provide a devastating portrait of the war in Afghanistan, revealing how coalition forces have killed hundreds of civilians in unreported incidents, how a secret Black Ops Special Forces unit named Task Force 373 hunts down targets for assassination or detention without trial, how Taliban attacks have soared, and how Pakistan is fueling the insurgency. We'll host a roundtable discussion. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. More than 90,000 secret military records of the U.S. war in Afghanistan were published online Sunday, providing new evidence that Americans have been misled for years about the 8-year-old war in Afghanistan. The White House quickly lashed out at the release of the documents. National Security Advisor James Jones said, quote, "The United States strongly condemns the disclosure, which could put the lives of Americans and our partners at risk and threaten our national security," he said. The documents were leaked by the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks and first published by the New York Times, The Guardian in London, and Der Spiegel in Germany. We'll have more on the story after headlines. In other news from Afghanistan, the BBC reports as many as 45 Afghan civilians died in a NATO airstrike in Helmand province on Friday. Witnesses told the BBC the attack occurred in daylight as dozens took shelter from fighting. Meanwhile, the U.S. military has launched a major hunt for 2 Navy sailors captured by the Taliban in eastern Afghanistan. This is Admiral Mike Mullen, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
There is a tremendous amount of effort going on to find them, to search, and beyond that, I can't discuss any additional details at this point in time.
The Pentagon has not released the names of the soldiers, but photos of the men have been released. The Taliban has said one of the men died in a firefight, the others being held hostage. In news from Iraq, The Independent of London reports a new medical study has found dramatic increases in infant mortality, cancer, and leukemia in the Iraqi city of Fallujah, which was bombarded by U.S. Marines in 2004. There's been a 4-fold increase in all cancers and a 12-fold increase in cancer in children under the age of 14. Infant mortality in the city is more than 4 times higher than in neighboring Jordan and 8 times higher than in Kuwait. The report says that types of cancer are, quote, similar to that in the Hiroshima survivors who were exposed to ionizing radiation from the bomb and uranium in the fallout. In other news from Iraq, at least 4 people have died after a suicide car bombing outside the Baghdad bureau of Arabiya television channel. The bomb destroyed the TV station's office. Former CIA Director Michael Hayden said Sunday the chances the U.S. will attack Iran are increasing. Hayden made the comment in an interview on CNN.
If it should, is there any alternative to taking out their facilities?
It seems inexorable, doesn't it? We engage, they continue to move forward. We vote for sanctions, they continue to move forward. We try to deter to dissuade, they continue to move forward. My personal view is that Iran, left to its own devices, will get itself to that step right below a nuclear weapon, that permanent breakout stage, so the needle isn't quite in the red for the international community. And frankly, that will be as destabilizing as they're actually having a weapon.
Michael Hayden's comments come as a group of Republican lawmakers are pushing for passage of a resolution that explicitly supports the right of Israel to use military force against Iran. 47 House Republicans have already signed on to the legislation. In military news, Lieutenant Dan Choi has received an honorable discharge from the Army for publicly admitting he's gay. Choi has been one of the military's most vocal critics of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
I have no resentment. I have no regret. To anybody in the military, this is clearly a failure of our government. We all know that America's promises are not manifest yet, so long as gay or transgender people are getting kicked out of their workplaces fired for telling the truth or expressing who they are.
On Saturday, at the Netroots Nation conference in Las Vegas, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid was forced to address Dan Choi's discharge after he was handed Choi's West Point ring and discharge papers by Joan McCarter on stage.
This morning, Dan Choi gave me this to give to you. That's his West Point ring. He says it doesn't mean what it did mean to him anymore. And this is his discharge.
Harry Reid agreed to keep Dan Choi's ring until he passed a repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Moments later, Choi joined Reid on stage and gave the Majority Leader a hug.
When we get it passed, you'll take it back, right?
I sure will, but I'm going to hold you accountable.
Okay, that's good.
We will run on Democracy Now! This week our extended interview with Lieutenant Dan Choi, recorded in Las Vegas. The board of directors of BP is meeting tonight to discuss the future of CEO Tony Hayward. According to multiple press reports, Hayward will step down as CEO and be replaced by Robert Dudley, who's heading the company's cleanup efforts in the Gulf of Mexico. But BP says the final decision has been made about Hayward. In news from Cambodia, a UN-backed tribunal has sentenced a senior Khmer Rouge commander to 35 years in prison for committing crimes against humanity. During the trial, Kangwakav, who is known as Dutch, admitted to overseeing the torture and the killing of more than 14,000 people. Some Cambodians have criticized the court process, saying Dutch should have been sentenced to life in prison. He could be released from jail in as little as 11 years. In Pennsylvania, 2 workers died on Friday when an oil storage tank at a natural gas well exploded. A fire at the well site continued to burn for 10 hours. Local officials had to call the team of firefighting experts flown up from Texas to extinguish the fire. The explosion occurred just hours after 1,000 Pennsylvania residents packed an Environmental Protection Agency meeting to express concern about the safety of natural gas drilling in the region. A new report found that people with mental disabilities, including U.S. citizens, face a greater risk of erroneous deportation by immigration officials because courts do not ensure fair hearings for those not able to represent themselves. The report was released today by Human Rights Watch and the American Civil Liberties Union. Hundreds of peace activists gathered in Albany this weekend for the United National Peace Conference. Speakers included Kathy Kelly, co-coordinator of Voices for Creative Nonviolence.
We have to become many more than we are now. And one of the ways to do that will be at the grassroots and the nitty-gritty, continuing to build and expand our communities, dedicated to looking for ways to take actions commensurate to the crimes being committed. It requires our lives. It requires us to rearrange our priorities to make the #1 priority in our everyday life becoming constant, persistent anti-war activists. What better purpose is there in life right now?
And the legendary broadcast journalist Daniel Schorr has died at the age of 93. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.